Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our final lecture of the Eclipse. This is going to be a lecture on philosophy, religion, and psychology. Dr. Jerry Tobin will be talking about psychology, Dr. Jim Snyder about philosophy, and Dr. Rich McCarty about religion. So I want to welcome to the stage Dr. Jerry Tobin.
Thank you and good morning. So the time is getting close. And whether you're here because you're curious or because you must, I hope our conversation stretches your imagination and invites you to appreciate how wonderfully small we are in the grand scheme. Knowing that helps us to take ourselves much less seriously. I wish to extend my appreciation to the Eclipse within our Gates organizers, Sarah Allen and Brian Colvin. You have done stellar work. And I also want to say how honored and humbled I am to share the stage with the sun and the moon. I won't say who's who. In my few minutes, which I promise I will go over, I want to talk about two big topics: lunacy and awe. While I am academically an expert in neither, I have the lived experience of both. So let's begin with lunacy. A former colleague had a doorpost that read, "The great thing about science is that it is true whether you believe it or not." Science has demystified many things that were not mystery. They were simply unknown. But we don't like not knowing, so we make up explanations. Given that we are witnessing a celestial event today, it's interesting to know that once upon a time, the world was flat, and the sun revolved around the earth. In fact, the church imprisoned Galileo in 1633 until his death in 1642 for arguing that the earth rotated around the sun. It was not until 1992 that Pope John Paul II apologized and pardoned Galileo, 359 years later. I guess we just wanted to be sure. So what happened? Well, in switching from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar, we lost 11 days. You went to bed on October 4th, and when you woke up, it was October 15th. Because the entire world was asleep for 11 days, there's no recorded history of this event. But while the world was asleep, the flat earth rounded itself into a globe, and the earth and the sun switched places. Zoop, zoop. Of course, we know that's not what happened. But people were smart back then. So how did we come up with such an obviously wrong explanation? We just made it up. We confabulate. We don't like not knowing. It makes us anxious. And to alleviate our anxiety, we create a reality to fit what we do know. The horizon looks like an edge, hence the edge of the earth. And the sun appears to move from east to west. In fact, it says so in the Bible. And who is going to argue with the inspired work of God? The interesting question for us is, what might we believe as certainly today that might be equally wrong? Einstein said, "I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious." So what is this lunatic talking about? Lunatic comes from the Latin luna, and it appears that the moon influences human behavior. During a full moon, emergency rooms are busier, patients in psychiatric units are more agitated, street crime increases, people have difficulty sleeping. And while these observations may all be true, they have absolutely nothing to do with the moon. The gravitational effect of the moon on the human person is less than the effect of the weight of a mosquito on a person. But, as George Costanza said to Jerry Seinfeld, remember, Jerry, it's not a lie if you believe it. It is not the moon, but our explanation and the accompanying expectations that influence our behavior. In psychology, we refer to this as confirmation bias. The ER is hopping on a particularly busy night, and we notice there is a full moon. Done. There's your explanation. And we are fine accepting these kinds of explanations. Crime is particularly high one month during a full moon. Done. There's your explanation. But genuine curiosity continues to wonder, and science introduces itself to philosophy and theology. Longitudinal studies suggest that over several months, even now, even years, show that there is no more likelihood of a busy ER night or increased street crime during a full moon than any other night of the month. But there is indeed some connection. Humankind has traversed the earth for 500,000 years or longer. We developed a relationship with light and darkness that is encoded in our DNA. Stonehenge, Newgrange, and many other sites point to the power of light in our ancestors' lives. As the moon has its cycles, we internalized a daily rhythm which we call circadian rhythm, circa diem, around the day. Circadian rhythms are the natural cycle of physical, mental, and behavioral changes the body goes through in a 24-hour cycle, without you even thinking about it. Mostly we think of it as the wake-sleep cycle, but it also influences energy, glucose metabolism, hormone secretions. For hundreds of thousands of years, we were awake in the light and asleep in the dark. But a full moon afforded us light in the dark and disrupted our circadian rhythm. We were awake. We heard wolves baying at the moon. We saw shadowy figures. What were they? Of course, they were werewolves, and then vampires. Dr. McCarty can plumb those depths with you. By the way, wolves howl no more or less when there is a full moon. In 1879, Edison patented the electric light bulb 145 years ago. And for our brains, which respond to light in the same way for hundreds of thousands of years, every night now has become a full moon. Some of us might even work all day in environments with no exposure to daylight. And so we see that despite great advances in technology and medicine, we have become more depressed and more anxious. The technology is neither good nor bad. Our relationship to it may determine our well-being. To go back to Einstein, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. What then can we do? Which leads me to the topic of awe. My dog knows when I'm coming home, not because she can tell time, but because of the light of the day. When I come home unexpectedly in the middle of the day, she quickly puts out her cigarette and tries to clear the air. How she will respond to the midday darkness will be interesting to observe. But I know how each of us will respond. We will respond with a sense of awe and wonder. And even though we can explain, even time to the second, this incredible event, it will be no less awesome. It is much like a chocolate cake. Knowing all the ingredients and how to bake it makes it no less delicious. So what is this experience of awe? I think it is one of the abilities that makes us distinctly human. It is a self-transcendent experience of something vast that widens and changes our experience of the world. A million stars, the birth of a child. This shared sense of awe may well have helped our ancestors to survive unexpected, unfamiliar natural occurrences, perhaps like a total eclipse of the sun, because they experienced them together. Since the beginnings of scientific psychology in 1879, a baby compared to the disciplines of my sun and moon colleagues, psychology has mostly focused on what is wrong in human behavior. It is only in the past 50 to 60 years that we have begun to look at optimal human being. Among the emotions we have studied is the complex and mysterious emotion of awe, and how and why we ought to cultivate it. In fact, the latest research suggests that taking time, that is, making time, to experience awe in nature, art, music, may be a pathway to improving our mental health and relationships. Experiences of awe can improve your mood, biochemically improve your health, help us to think more critically, making us less susceptible to easy self-serving arguments. Maslow argued that peak experiences allow us to see more of the overall truth, unfettered by the cognitive distortions we use to protect ourselves from psychic pain. It can make us less materialistic by helping us to see our connectedness rather than our separateness. We gradually become one with the world as we sense ourselves part of something bigger than ourselves, which leads us to a sense of smallness, not in the sense of inferiority, but in our capacity for humility and tolerance and acceptance, our central core value here at Mercyhurst, compassionate hospitality. Awe is a here and now experience, which allows us to be more present-oriented, to be in the moment. Depression is rooted in the past, what has happened, and how the past continues to affect us. Anxiety is about an uncertain future, what could happen but hasn't happened yet. Being in the present increases our sense of generosity toward others and toward ourselves, and what we give always returns to us. Finally, awe connects us. I imagine if you are viewing the eclipse today with family or friends, you will feel closer to them. And if you are standing beside a total stranger, you will feel some connection to them. And perhaps in the traffic jams on the way home, we might even feel more generous toward the person in front of us who has no idea where they're going. So do we need to wait another 120 years for a solar eclipse in Erie to experience awe? No. It's there for each of us every day. We have the great advantage of being on a great lake whose vastness is overwhelming, where sunsets are stunning. Niagara Falls, the eighth wonder of the world, is 2 hours away. But even more simply, we might notice trees and plants coming back to life. Listen to the rain or the wind. Taste the same food for the first time. Watch YouTube videos of babies laughing. Go through picture albums, or listen to a really awesome talk. Like beauty, awe is in the eye of the beholder. Be sure to wear your Eclipse glasses. Thank you.
Do you think it will cut out during my presentation? If the presentation's up, it stays on. Well, Dr. Tobin, that was awesome and fabulous. Hopefully not confabulous, but definitely fabulous. I too would like to thank the Eclipse Committee. They've been working on something that was, for most of us in the darkness for well over a year, and sometimes the work of really good committees only come to light almost like a corona effect during an eclipse at the right time and in the right circumstances. So I thank the Eclipse Committee. I'd also like to thank my colleagues, Dr. McCarty and Dr. Tobin. I think if 3 of us are the Earth, Sun, and Moon, I'm definitely the Earth because I'm always being benefited by their enlightened insights. I too am not quite sure which one is the lunar or the solar influence here. What I would like to do today is to provide some historical and even cosmological context to the eclipse that we will soon be experiencing. My background is in philosophy, so I'd like to connect the eclipse to the birth of philosophy and science in Western civilization. And I'd like to do so in the context of myth, religion, art, spirituality. For at bottom, philosophy and science are born out of these, and so the story goes, often eclipses them. Personally, I like to think of them all, spirituality, religion, art, philosophy, and science, as good friends with very different personalities who are all in the pursuit and on their way to the same things: truth, beauty, goodness, justice, and wisdom. And I think the comments that I will offer here today will connect quite nicely with Dr. Tobin's comments, because at the end of the day, philosophy really is all about awe and confabulation. As Plato and Aristotle put it, philosophy begins with profound wonder in the face of the great mysteries of existence: birth, life, death, the seasons, change, the nature of reality, the meaning of life, good and evil, and who we choose to be in the world in relation to others and to the cosmos all around us. What sets philosophy and science apart, however, is that it uses various forms of questioning, inductive and deductive logic, and always a healthy dose of verifiable and falsifiable evidence to guide its intuitions, its many conversations, its speculations, and its considerations, at least on the best of days. And always in an attempt to understand and demystify life's great mysteries while freeing us as much as possible from our natural tendency for confabulation and building theories that might lend themselves to conspiracy theories. Of course, such high expectations might be the greatest of all confabulations, which I think both psychology and theology might agree on, at least on some days, but us in philosophy, we always go for it anyways. So I'd like to open some slides and take us on a little journey. We'll take a little tour. We're going to start in Rome, and And I would like to go to Rome and take all of us along and gather up some images and associations that have everything to do with philosophy, science, religion, art, and spirituality. Why Rome? Well, it's the center of one of the cultural centers of the West, and certainly the center of Christianity, and certainly Catholic Christianity. But going there also gets us connected to Greek philosophy, Greek science, Greek mythology, Greek art, and what I hope to do is to show how the event of an eclipse brings all of these things together in a remarkable way. So let's get started. So we'll go to the Vatican, to Rome. If you haven't been there, you got to get there. And next, what we want to do is go to the Sistine Chapel, which is just adjacent to the Vatican and in the Vatican City, just adjacent to St. Peter's Basilica. If you go there, you'll meet all sorts of wonderful people, tourists, pilgrims, priests, and when you enter the Sistine Chapel, you'll be awestruck at the painting on the wall at the end of the chapel, the blue one there, and that is Raphael's the Transfiguration of Christ, and it's a masterpiece. But I think everybody agrees it almost pales in comparison to the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, which is painted by Michelangelo. And this is one of the most famous paintings in the world, and one of the reasons it is because it's a painting that is centered on, based on what many believe to be the greatest story ever told, and that is the story of creation. Of God's creation of the universe, God's creation of human beings, God's the nature of good and evil, and so forth. And if we direct our attention to that ceiling, we see just some remarkable images. This picture gives us a glimpse of Michelangelo's vision of God's creation of the universe, and I call our attention to the centrality of the sun in this painting. Certainly God is a Renaissance individual, a creator par excellence, all-powerful, all-knowing, setting the world into motion, and there's nothing more significant in our world than the presence of the sun. It makes life possible, it makes human flourishing possible, it makes all sorts of metaphors that help us to understand the life of the mind, the life of the heart, the light, truth, reason, goodness, and beauty. So I think the painting itself gets us into the right mindset for considering something like an eclipse. It does so because in an eclipse, the sun is totally covered over in a total solar eclipse. And what that means for human beings is really quite remarkable and astounding. So in this painting, we see God creating Adam. And I don't have the next painting I'm going to refer to here on the slides, but the next painting is the fall of man, the fall out of paradise. And if we think about what essentially constitutes the fall, what we come to realize is that what constitutes it is essentially an eclipse of God, of the divine, of morality, and the upsurgence of evil and ignorance into the world, into our lives. So right here with this painting, these three paintings that I've referred to, we have essentially wrapped our arms around the central drama of human existence. Everything important to us is suggested by these amazing paintings. But that's not the destination of where we're going right now. We're going somewhere else. In the Sistine Chapel, normally you come in on one end and you go out the other, but there is another exit, and it's hidden by one of the tapestries to the right there. And that's a door that leads into what is known as the Pope's Parlor. And the Pope's Parlor contains its own set of incredible paintings and masterpieces. There are four of them, and I'll quickly go through them. One is the Adoration of the Sacrament, and here I call our attention to the absolute centrality of light, resplendent golden light in this painting, and it captures the Trinity and the Eucharist, the Eucharistic celebration. So we're inspired by the light of creation. There's another painting. This is not a particularly good version of it, but the cardinal theological virtues of fortitude, prudence, and temperance. So certainly there are Christian paintings, and one would think there would only be Christian paintings, but there isn't. There's something unexpected and surprising. There are two other paintings that take us back into the heart and soul of Greek culture, Greek myth, Greek religion, Greek philosophy, and Greek science. This painting is a painting called Mount Parnassus. In the center, we have the god Apollo. Around the god Apollo are the 9 muses of artists and artistic inspiration. And they're the daughters of Zeus, and Zeus has put Apollo essentially in charge of them as their guide and or inspiration. So what this does is it gathers together the deep history of Greek art, dance, sculpture, poetry, epic poetry, sacred poetry, lyrical poetry, sculpture, and theater, Greek drama, Greek tragedy, great literature. But Apollo, who is Apollo? Well, Apollo is the god of the sun. He's the god of reason, the god of truth, the god of goodness, the god of beauty, the god of art, the god of wisdom, the god of spiritual, psychological purification, the god of enlightenment, especially rational enlightenment, which takes us to the next, I'm going to skip over that, takes us to the next painting, and that is a total masterpiece by Raphael, The School of Athens. And this painting is remarkable for so many reasons, but what it does is it gathers together all the most important Greek philosophers and scientists. And I think it's totally remarkable that we would find this in the Pope's parlor. I think it's wonderful to think about a Pope sitting in a contemplative, private, public space, being surrounded by images of the essence of Christian faith and images of the essence of philosophy and science. But I want to make a few comments about this, and we'll get to the eclipse here in just a minute. So we see in this painting, at the very center of the painting, 2 of the titans of Western civilization, philosophy and science. On the left, we have in red Plato in the visage of Leonardo da Vinci. He's pointing up to the heavens, to the realm of eternal ideas and values and forms, abstract theories, systems of information that allow us to understand the way the world works, the way the universe works, the way we work, the way society works. Beside him is his best and brightest and certainly most influential and famous student, Aristotle, in blue. And these two, of course, we know from reading their works, they're simply heirs of a fellow to your right, or to your left, in green there. That's Socrates. And Socrates is widely regarded as the father of Western philosophy, introduces dialogue and dialectic into our thinking and conversation, holds everybody to the standard of rational explanations and justifications. So these are really important people. There are many others here, and I simply point out a couple. We've got in the front, down right in the center, in purple, that's Heraclitus, painted in the image of, or a portrait of, Michelangelo himself. Over to the right, we've got Euclid. We have Ptolemy, who formulated theories about the solar cycles and about eclipses. In the bottom left, we have Pythagoras, the father of the Pythagorean theorem, and we don't know if the next person that I'm going to talk about here is there or not, but it's Thales. And we'll spend the rest of this little talk on Thales and his connection to the birth of philosophy, science, and eclipses. So there's the main players, and we'll move on to Thales. So who is Thales? Well, he's famous for three central core reasons. First of all, he's the first person, so the tradition has it, that tries to actually explain the nature of reality, the laws of the universe, without using any religious myth, stories, and or traditions, and trying his best to actually explain the nature of the universe using logic, induction, deduction, a body of evidence, bodies of evidence, and so forth. Second, he's also famous for giving birth to what is widely regarded as the core concern of philosophy, and that is the problem of the one and the many. And that's the problem of what one thing must exist in order for anything else, all the many different things, nearly infinite number of things that exist in the universe, and how does the one make them possible, and how are they, the many different things in the universe, manifestations of the one? So that's a core focus of philosophy, and that really comes into focus for the first time with the philosophy of Thales. And thirdly, Thales is famous for something scientific. And as the story goes, as told by Herodotus and Diogenes Laertius in the 2nd century AD, Thales is best known for the first accurate prediction of a total solar eclipse in 585, I think the date is, BCE, before the Common Era. Well, we don't know if that's true or not. Herodotus and Diogenes Laertius tell us that it's true. But regardless of whether or not it's true, it's absolutely remarkable, because somebody took the evidence that he learned from Egyptian scientists and astronomers and astrologers, from Babylonia science, from Assyrians. He put it all together using logic, using theories about how the earth, the sun, and the moon could relate, and he predicted a total solar eclipse. Modern science informs us that there was an eclipse in that year. It would have been observable by somebody in ancient Greece. There was a war going on in what we now call Turkey today. And that war stopped because of the total solar eclipse. And we imagine Thales saying, "I told you so." In that moment, philosophy and science is born, and it has never turned back. And we continue to try to figure out the laws of nature, and we continue to try to explain and predict what we find so deeply mysterious. Finally, I don't know that there's anything more shocking or awe-inspiring than a total eclipse of the sun. So I've been told. I've never seen one. I can't wait for today. But we do know a couple of things. In the ancient Mediterranean basin, there were a number of different cultures: Egyptian, Phoenician, Assyrian, Persian, Greek, the Latins, the Etruscans, and above them, the Celtic peoples. And there were a lot of different theories about what eclipses were. Well, in ancient Greece, a couple of individuals got together and they started to pose the question, which of these stories is true? And then they took a deeper theoretical approach, an abstract approach, and they said, are any stories true? And then they turned their attention to the question of truth. What is it? How would we know a claim to be true if and when it actually is true? And with that, philosophy is born. Certainly on a day like today, we can find ourselves in the same sort of position, such that what happened back there in ancient Greece can happen in our lives when we try to figure out these incredible, overpowering, majestic mysteries and experiences. So with all that said, I wish us all well as we go out into the eclipse, and keep in mind that we're part of a larger story, a larger process, a larger history that's been unfolding for thousands of years, that reaches into the depths of religion, spirituality, art, history of philosophy, and science. Thank you.
I know we have thanked orally the Eclipse Day Committee, but let's actually give them a round of applause for what they've done. Brian, thank you. So my name is Rich McCarty, and I have been in the Religious Studies department here for the last 15 and a half years at Mercyhurst. I came from the University of Iowa, where I did my PhD in Religious Studies. I'm also a member of the clergy, and so I find myself wearing multiple hats whenever asked to speak about religion. In the academic setting, it is only to explore religion. But I want to acknowledge that I'm also a practitioner and somebody who engages theological thought when I'm not at Mercyhurst University. And so when it comes to thinking about religion and eclipses, one of the things that my mind immediately does is just to generally say, okay, how have different religions thought about eclipses? And of course, that could be a semester-long lecture for you, so I'm not going to do that. But I'll just choose 3 out of the Abrahamic traditions. For example, in ancient Jewish Talmudic writings, it suggests that an eclipse is an ill omen for the world, but more contemporary Jewish views suggest that eclipses should be read in a different way, that God created a system, that is the cosmos, that would remind us that our choices can create darkness even at times when there should be light. So it's a reflection on the natural order, thinking about how are we using our free will. There's a really great hadith in the Islamic tradition, and it actually happened at a sad occasion of the Prophet Muhammad's, the death of his son. And some of his companions, when that happened, there was an eclipse, and some of his companions said, perhaps this is a sign about the death of your son and the sorrow of that. And the Prophet Muhammad said, no, we should not assign superstitious readings into the natural order or evil readings of the natural order. But rather, if we do find ourselves in awe and wonder at the cosmos, that these should just point us towards the fact that there is a God, that there is a creator behind all of this, and should move us to offer God our praise. And to this day, in the Islamic tradition, on this day, in fact, the eclipse will be a time of prayer and for thanking God for God being God. In the Christian tradition, which is where I'm going to spend most of my time today, there have been a lot of different views about eclipses, and a lot of eclipses are seen as omens and warnings. One in particular in 1652, a solar eclipse that occurred over Scotland and Ireland, was interpreted by Christians as a sign of the coming of Judgment Day. And that's going to be a major motif within Christianity, that something about eclipses points towards Judgment Day and to the end of the world. So without going into a lot of history, what I noticed just scrolling on my phone at night when I can't sleep at 3 a.m. is that I was noticing that there were a lot of religious interpretations of the eclipse that is going to happen today in North America. Show of hands, how many of you have seen at least one social media post that has to do with religion and the eclipse today? Yeah, obviously, it's in the mindset of folks around us. One that I thought was interesting was a 4-8 connection, because as we know last week, or somebody picked up, there was a 4.8 earthquake in New Jersey. And then, of course, the total solar eclipse in the United States is going to happen today. And somebody put that together with the book of Exodus, chapter 4, verse 8. If they will not believe you or heed the first sign, they may believe the second sign. Now, this is what we call in both theology, in the practice of religion, and in religious studies, the academic study, eisegesis. Eisegesis is when you read yourself into the text. Exegesis is when you study the text to try to understand, if we can, what did it mean then, and does it have any application today? So this would be a prime example of eisegesis. The Exodus 4:8 is a Jewish text. It's written about the story of liberation of the Israelite people from Egypt. It was not about a prediction of an eclipse in 2024. What I've seen more of in social media is a prediction that this eclipse is somehow a sign of the end of the world. And Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene on X, formerly Twitter, wrote this: God is sending America strong signs to tell us to repent. Earthquakes and eclipses and many more things to come. I pray that our country listens. Now, you might have a reaction to her based on politics or your partisan stripe. She received a lot of critiques on this. In fact, she got a community note on X saying, actually, this might not be accurate. She responded after receiving a lot of criticism. Many have mocked and scoffed at this post and even put the community notes. Jesus talked about that in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12, verses 54 through 56. Yes, eclipses are predictable and earthquakes happen, and we know when comets are passing by. However, God created all these things and uses them to be signs for those of us who believe. And I'm going to tell you this morning, regardless of maybe what your intellectual or emotional response might be to Representative Green's posting of that, she believes this deeply, and she is not the only one. She belongs to a movement of people who are generally called evangelical to fundamentalist, who belong to a certain stripe of theology that reads signs and wonders as part of what points to the end of time, even if we can predict them, as we can predict eclipses. So why do some Christians read natural events as signs of the end? This was a pretty big deal when I was in seminary, which was taking place between 1998 and 2001. A lot of people were saying that the turn of the millennium was going to be, the end of time. So a lot of theological energy was spent here. I want to point to a few things in the Christian tradition. Christians have something called eschatology. Christians aren't alone in having this, but eschatology is a branch of theology. And eschatology has to do with the study of last things or the end of time. And in particular, Christian theology and Christian eschatology has a major focus on the study of or a belief that Jesus of Nazareth, who is believed to be the Christ, the one that was just celebrated as resurrected from the dead and ascended, will return in glory to judge and restore the world. That's a pretty big deal if that's part of your core beliefs, that Christ will come back. He's not just somebody that we look at in history, but one who will come again. Why? I can't go through all the scriptures or doctrines, but let me give you a few. In the book of Acts, chapter 1, verses 9 through 11, it is said that as they were watching, Jesus was lifted up, and a cloud took him out of their sight. While he was going and they were gazing toward heaven, suddenly 2 men in white robes stood by them. They said to the apostles, "Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking up toward heaven? This Jesus who has been taken up from you into heaven will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven." The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, verses 29 through 30 and verse 33. "Immediately after the suffering of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with great power and glory. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near at the very gates." The Nicene Creed, which was articulated in the 4th century, tries to put this in a short statement of, it's a mystery of faith, but a short doctrinal statement. The Nicene Creed says, "Jesus ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of the Father. He will come again in glory to judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end." The first articulation of the Nicene Creed was in 325 CE. It was adapted up and through 381 CE. When you go to the scriptures to try and figure out these types of things, which is what Christians sometimes do, one thing that we have to admit academically, there might be some theological disagreement in the room, but academically we have to admit there is no one systematic theology about the end of time in the Christian scriptures, but there are a variety of beliefs that different authors write about in different ways and to different people at different times. For example, in the Gospel of Matthew, we're told that when Christ does return in power and in glory, he will reward those who have lived justly and with kindness. In fact, in the great parable about the end of time, Jesus welcomes into paradise those who have loved the stranger at the gate, those who have given food to the hungry, and those who have given the thirsty something to drink. Those who recognize Jesus and say, "Lord, Lord," who appear to have some kind of theological belief about him, he turns them away because there has been no justice or kindness in them in their life. In other places, the New Testament describes Christ coming again to rescue or save his people from persecution. In other places, we get more of a teaching about resurrection from the dead. This is one that I spent a lot of time on Easter Sunday talking to my church about. Resurrection is not resuscitation. Resuscitation is like CPR. Resurrection is changing mortal bodies into immortal bodies. So the resurrection of Christ surprises everyone because in Judaism, there was already a belief among some Jews in the resurrection of the dead, but it wasn't supposed to happen until the very end of time, like far out on the horizon. So when the Christians say that Jesus was resurrected, it's rather shocking, right? It's something not to be expected because this is what happens at the end of time. Christians pick up on this and say, not only is Jesus resurrected, but you will be resurrected as well. Other places in the New Testament say that Jesus will come and establish a reign of peace that will have no end, in which case the story of creation beginning in paradise returns to paradise. It's more like a circle than it is a linear line. And then in the book of Revelation, which is a contested book among certain traditions, it says there that there will be a reign of 1,000 years of peace on earth before there is a final battle between good and evil. There will be 1,000 years of peace on earth before the final battle between good and evil. This 1,000 years has been called millennialism. And millennialism has ended up being kind of a big deal. Whether you've heard of this or not, it has been a big deal in the Christian tradition. But it has raised questions, when is that coming? When is this 1,000 years coming, and how will it come? Christians absolutely do not agree about this, right? There's three major camps about it, although technically speaking, this first one here represents the vast majority of Christians. Largely Catholic, mainline Protestants take this view. Amillennialism says we don't know, right? It puts the A before it, kind of like atheism or agnosticism. We don't know what it's going to be about, but here's what we do know. Jesus came. We're living in this age. We are in the already kingdom and not yet kingdom. It's already here, and that Christ and the Spirit are here. It's not yet here, and that we continue to struggle. But one day, in a mystery of faith, Christ will return. We have no idea what that will look like, but we'll trust God to be God, and we'll keep doing our best until then. A second millennial view is what's called postmillennialism. And this view really got some traction in the 19th century, and it said, well, if Jesus is Jesus and he promises that we will do greater things than even he did, then what we should expect is a gradual progression of flourishing on the earth. And that can happen through the miraculous, but that can also happen through the innovation of science and technology. So with the great wars of the 20th century, a lot of postmillennialism went away because we said, are we really going to do that, or are we going to bring our own annihilation? There are still postmillennialists today who believe we should train our thoughts and not only our thinking, but our reason and our technology with the principles of the gospel in order to make life better on earth. And therefore, there is no a literal 1,000 years. It becomes a metaphor for we create peace on earth, and then Christ comes to complete that perfection, and then we live in glory forever and ever. But what we really see with those who interpret eclipses as signs of judgment is what's called premillennialism. And this is a theology that is deeply meaningful, as I said, to millions of people, many evangelicals and fundamentalists. A lot has been written about it. So, for example, on my bookshelf, I just pulled off today a book called 2008, God's Final Witness, Why the World Was Going to End in 2008. I mean, I don't want us to laugh at that because somebody, I write books, and writing books is hard work. Somebody really believed that there was enough signs and wonders to believe it was coming in 2008. And what you see up here, I would need a couple classes to unpack this chart with you. But there are those who believe, for example, these premillennialists believe that before the 1,000-year kingdom, there will be an antichrist who comes on the earth. There will be a rapture of true believers. And it's all, like there's a deep theology of a timeline. So when they look at signs and wonders and what it is that Jesus said, the sun will be darkened, they don't mean to say we know the day Jesus is coming back, but they believe that all of it points to that reality of what is being warned. And in particular, premillennialists believe that history is on a date with destiny, that an antichrist will rise, a really evil person who wins over a lot of folks, but then turns out to be nothing but evil incarnate. There will be tribulation on the earth where true believers will be persecuted, and then a final judgment. The signs and wonders in the sky from scriptures are thus reminders to us to get on the right side of God and to eke out some righteousness here on earth, and that those who mock such views mock God. And that's what Representative Green was saying. She believes that this is the trajectory of it. So I don't want to make fun of that belief. I want to say try to understand it better so that you can actually have a conversation. There's another view, and so I'm just going to share the one that I have, and it actually aligns with my colleagues here today. Or we can take a look at eclipses. They can be a time of reflecting on the wonder of the cosmos that we live in, to understand that there is more to reality than just earth. Humility is a really good thing. To remind ourselves that we are not the be-all, end-all, and at the very same time as we realize that, these celestial events that we're going to experience in just a few hours can be a time to reflect on the value of our life in the here and now, to enjoy these things, to be lost in awe and in wonder, because they may never come again for us. But we have them today, and we have each other today. And these two sentiments, I believe, are not caught up not only in religious traditions, but in the words of one of my favorite musicals, Rent. And the first time I saw it, I was just sobbing in my seat, because I think this is what it points us to. There's only now. There's only here. Give in to love or live in fear. No other path, no other way, no day but today. Thank you. So we do have a few moments to have conversation with you, and then we'll dismiss you to the football field afterwards. So any questions? Yes, please. So the question for those of you who are online or didn't hear it is there any conversation about this eclipse is happening after Good Friday, Holy Week, and the resurrection? And yeah, in some places, they would look at it as these are progressive signs and wonders. They're all pointing, right, at the coming of Judgment Day. And that would be something maybe a little bit more out of the premillennial camp, although in evangelical and fundamentalist traditions, Holy Week isn't quite as ingrained as a liturgical, right? But Easter certainly is always celebrated. Whereas in the more amillennial camps, Catholicism, mainline Protestantism, it is a coincidence of the natural order of things, right? Because Easter is set based on a lunar calendar in the Christian tradition. So for example, next year we're going to be having a different conversation because it's falling on 4/20. So if you know what that means, right? So there's a lot of coincidences that happen, and I think one of the things that one has to be mindful of is what are we reading into it, right? So the academic study of religion would say, okay, what is the significance of somebody who builds meaning into the eclipse because of Good Friday just happening? And you're right. In some of the gospel narratives, it talks about there being 3 hours of darkness. And so you'll have some theologians who reflect on, well, was that some kind of an eclipse? And then you kind of say, well, not a natural one, right? Because today's eclipse is going to last totality about 4 minutes. So a 3-hour darkness suggests something more along the lines of a kind of sorrow fell, right, upon the earth. And with the Gospels and all other scriptures, we always have to be mindful of the question, what kind of poetic language are they using to tell a deep truth, or are they trying to actually bear witness to something that they saw in the natural order? So the answer is yes and no and everything in between. Yes, please. Religiously? So when I started going into, histories of religion, all eclipses were mostly read as bad omens, except in the Islamic tradition, where the Prophet Muhammad said, we're not doing that, right? We're going to look at this as the wonder of creation, and let these things point us towards the creator behind it. Otherwise, there tends to be bad omens assigned to it, or a time of purification and to get right with your own self, in multiple traditions from Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, and Judaism. Yes, the question is, are Catholics amillennialists? Yes, Catholics are amillennialists. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't find a Catholic who individually is a premillennialist, right? That sometimes happens too. The question was, and then I'll pass the mic, could this idea that these celestial events are omens point back toward psychological anxiety?
This works, yeah. So I think I would argue that human beings are meaning makers. And because we don't like not understanding, we make up stuff. If there was one way of understanding human experiences, we would all share it. But there are multiple religions and ways of understanding the divine, things that are beyond science, and still we want to know. And so we come up with stuff that is good enough for me, and oftentimes we stop questioning, and that's where we make our mistake.
I would also say that when you go into religious spiritual traditions that aren't caught up in the Abrahamic traditions, so if we were to take a look at Celtic spirituality, earth-based spirituality, darkness and light are times of empowerment and times to commune with nature, not to be afraid of it. So that can also tell you something a little bit about the community, how they interpret the world that they're in. Yes, please.
So, thank you for the question. Thanks for the question. The question is, are there other ways of understanding a story about Diogenes Laertius? By the way, that's a fellow who was pictured in Raphael's The School of Athens on the steps, laying kind of like this, and he's in blue, really relaxed. The question is, are there other ways to interpret the story of Diogenes of Laertius and his very famous meeting with Alexander the Great? Is there scientific evidence, religious interpretations, and so forth? And that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. What we do know, according to the story, is that Diogenes was a homeless person. He preferred the company of dogs. He lived in a barrel. He was greatly admired by Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great sought him out, went up to him, and asked him, and told Diogenes, Diogenes, I will grant any wish you have, one wish, what is it? And Diogenes said, please step out of the path of the sun. Like, get out of the way, you're blocking the sun. That's all he asked. Is there scientific evidence for that or religious implications? Sure. Do I know it? No. No. And it is a story, but a great story. Yeah. Thanks for the question.
And I think with that, we are out of time. So thank you very much for coming today. And Brian, you would like them to go to the football field nowish? Around 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock. The events are starting. Okay, eat lunch and then go to the football field. We'll see you then.